do just the quickest blah blah on earth. Process and Performance is a series we started a year and a half ago in the fall of 2011. And it started after a few conversations I had with Jim and Nicole and Lynn Chat, who regrets that they can't be here tonight, and because they're in Hungary. And it came after I actually was working with Ivo Van Hove and Tom Ryan on The Little Foxes. And I had a couple really cool conversations with an actress in that with me named Elizabeth Marvel about the difference between working on non-traditional work or avant-garde work versus normal plays. And as an actor, how the adjustments I had to make in my mind and psyche and body and all of that shit. And so those conversations I continued with Jim and Linda, and we decided we'd start this series where we get to sit down and kind of talk in a way that I feel like actors don't usually talk to each other about their work, in a way that maybe poets or painters or musicians talk to each other a little bit more. So that's why we do this, and we always pay homage to all the people who've come here before, who include Alan Lauren, David Greenspan, Elizabeth Marvel, Ruth Malachek, Scott Shepard, Kate Volk, Henry Stram, Juliana Francis Kelly, David Patrick Kelly, Lola Pashalinski, Anne Gridley, Elizabeth Connor, Robert Johansson.
I think.
And yeah, so those are all the people we've had. And tonight we're very happy to have Bill Camp, Thomas J. Ryan, and Joan MacIntosh, who's on her way from.
She's here.
She's downstairs. She's walking up, so she's just like clawing wildly. And another thing, we're going to show like two really short, very short clips of Ivo's work for those of you who may have never seen it before. Because just like something we've heard from people who've come here before is like, I didn't know the work of who we're talking about, so I didn't have a vocabulary to contextualize the conversation. So yeah, so that's all about that. And just coming up, I'm going to get this queued up, and then we'll start and talk for a little bit. No, it's not Joan. Never mind. So Joan's going to be here at some point. This is like so anticipatory.
I sit in one of the late seats, which is better.
Are you waiting for her?
Yeah, we're like moving around.
If you'd like to,
but anyway,
to move the video, sure. I just want to sit over to that end one because it's.
She's coming up. Should we start? Should we start this video?
Yeah, why don't we watch this one?
Just start the video.
Yeah.
We all have to.
Well, there are people who eat the earth and eat all who belong to MacIntosh. And then there are people who stand around and watch them eat.
And as the man who's opened the door to our future.
That's sort of beginning to look as if the deal's all set. I may not believe so.
Bertie and I have just been planning what we want. I know what I want. Horace, you finally arrived!
Zed said you wanted me to come home. I felt so pleased at that. And I do estimate profits very high. For myself and also for you.
And what does that mean?
We are ready with our 2/3 of the money. Your third, Horace's, doesn't seem to be ready.
Well, I know these things are going on. All because smoke's going to start out of a building that ain't even up yet.
Why should I give you the money? To pound the bones of this town, to make dividends for you to spend.
The contracts will be signed this week, and Mark will want to see the money soon after. I ain't giving you my word that Mark will put up the money. Not where? There I will be when I want. Like company.
Okay, so as all the press said, it was really great. And then Ivo also has a company when he's not working here in Amsterdam called the Toneel Group, and this is from their production of Angels in America.
sta je tegenover een carrière in Washington op justitie? Ik hoef de telefoon maar te pakken, even babbelen met Ed en je kan beginnen.
Als wat
Staf,
precies?
staf, landelijk.
Het is helemaal niks om ongerust over te zijn. Volgens mij gaat het goed. Behalve dan dat ik gek word.
Nou, we hebben de hele toxoplasmose set gedaan en er is
Nee, dat weet ik! Maar ik heb het gevoel dat er iets vreselijks gaat gebeuren.
Zo.
Mama, ik ben homoseksueel.
Dus u bent ook lief tegen mij of u gaat morgen piepen van de pijn?
Lief.
Lief.
Brian? Ja? Je houdt van me? Ja? Als ik er nu tussenuit knijp, zou je me dan eeuwig haten? Ja. Kom.
Waarheen?
Naar huis met mij.
Ik ken je niet eens.
Oh, dat geldt toch ook voor mij?
Heere God. Wat een waardeloze manier om de pijp uit te gaan.
So without further ado, Bill Camp, Thomas J. Ryan, and Joan MacIntosh. Just a little context on them, because they won't brag on themselves, but I'll brag on them. Bill Camp has been seen on Broadway in Death of a Salesman, The Seagull, Corn Boy, Heartbreak House. He's worked with Robert Woodruff on Notes from the Underground, which is one of my favorite things I've ever seen in my life. And he's about to work with him again in the year with 13 Moons. He did The Misanthrope with Ivo Van Hove. He was in the movie Lincoln, the great movie Compliance, which I love this year. I liked Lincoln too, it was great. He was on Damages, Boardwalk Empire. He has an Obie for Homebody Kabul here at the workshop, an Elliot Norton Award for Ollie's Prison, and an Elliot Norton Award for Longest Journey into Night, both at ART. Joan MacIntosh is the co-founder of the Performance Group, where she did Commune, Dionysus 69, Truth of the Crime, for which she won Obies, on Broadway, and Orpheus Descending, The Seagull, A Bright Room. She's also done A Bright Room Called Day, The Bat Guy, Macbeth, All's Well That Ends Well, Julius Caesar, Cymbeline, all with the New York Shakespeare Festival, yes. And with Ivo, she did Alice in Bed, More Stately Mansions, The Misanthrope, and assistant-directed Streetcar Named Desire. She won a Drama League Award and an Obie Award for More Stately Mansions, and a Drama Desk Award for her solo performance in Request Concert at the Women's Project, and an Elliot Norton Award for Britannicus at ART, also directed by Robert Woodruff. Thomas J. Ryan was in The Little Foxes.
Be in 13 Moons with
and in 13 Moons with Bill. Thomas J. Ryan was in The Little Foxes and The Misanthrope. He has a Drama Desk Award for The Temperamentals. He was on Broadway in The Next Room, or the Vibrator play. Off Broadway in Tom Ryan Thinks He's James Mason, which is one of my favorite things I ever saw in my life. In the matter of J. Robert Oppenheimer, Celebration of the Room, Judah and the Paycock, Sin, on film, and Fay Grimm, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and The Dying Gaul, and The Legend of Bagger Vance, and of course the great Henry Fool, all directed by, well, that and Fay Grimm directed by Hal Hartley. So that's a little context on them. I forgot to turn this on, and I'm supposed to, so that Rachel doesn't yell at me. There we go. So that's these three guys, a little context for you on them. And so can you guys, just for us, could you talk a little bit about how you first came to meet and work with Ivo? Joan?
I'll start.
You started, because you've worked with him longest.
Because I'm the oldest. I had left, I'll try to be very brief, because it's a long story, but I want to do the very short version. I had given up the theater, acting, for a while. I was doing energy healing work. And Jim called and asked me if I wanted to replace an actress, Barbara Sokoa, who is one of my great heroines as an actress, in More Stately Mansions. And I said, well, let me read the script. So they messaged the script. It was a very bad time for me, as I was very busy with my healing practice. My son was going to India. Anyway, the script came, and they wanted me to be there right away and to learn the lines in a week. And the script arrived, and it was this thick. And I looked at it, and it's basically there are, I think think 6 characters, but 3 people talk a lot. And so I said, I read it and I was freaked out. I said, I can't do it. I can't be ready in a week. I can't do my best work. Anyway, this went back and forth about 5 times, and the workshop kept saying, well, we'll do this for you. And then I would say, okay, but then this. And they'd say, well, no, we'll do this. And so finally it came down to the wire, and they said, okay, it's now or never. The company's assembled. We'll either continue or we won't. You're the only person who we want to take this role over. And I was so terrified. I had a blind date with a French person I'd met not online, but I mean, it was before the days of online dating. It was like you were in the back of the New York Review of Books, and this was, I think, from some other ridiculous. And I had never had. It was for lunch, and so he was sitting on my couch, and Jerry Manning, the casting director at the time, called me and said, okay, now's the moment. And I was so scared. I said, well, I can't tell you now. And he said, you have to tell us now. I said, well, then no. And he said, are you sure? I said, yes. So this was a Friday, and this poor man was sitting on my couch, and I burst into tears. We'd never met before. And I sat next to him, and I sobbed on his shoulder. And anyway, he was very sweet. We went to lunch. And then Monday, I spent the whole weekend grieving, thinking I'd made a big mistake. So Jerry Manning called on Monday and said, okay, but Ivo and Joan are back in, they were living in Antwerp at the time. They're back in Belgium. They want to know if there's any chance you'd like to do this in the future. And I said, yes, absolutely, yes. So he said, okay, great, we're going to start on Wednesday. I thought he was talking about like... So I said, oh my God. So they arranged for a call with Jim and Ivo and me on the phone that night at midnight. I guess because it was, what, 6 or 7 in the morning for Ivo. And so we talked, and Ivo said, I know I have a terrible, because he was new to the States then, and I guess he had a terrible reputation, but I didn't know anything about it, for being whatever, a taskmaster. He was just a sweet pussycat on the phone. So anyway, we had a lovely conversation, and I started on Wednesday. And it changed my life, I have to say, doing that play. I learned the lines, well, it took me 3 weeks to learn the lines, but around the clock I had people coming to my apartment helping me, and we opened it, and they were amazing because one last little thing, I guess they were so desperate to have somebody. I was teaching at the healing school that I went to at the time, and I said, there's a week in October that I absolutely can't be here. I'm committed. If I don't go to the healing school, I'm fired. And they closed down the show for a week. And because, I mean, well, maybe we'll get into it, because the show was so taxing physically, as Ivo shows tend to be, but we were bruised and, I mean, literally bruises, especially the other 2 actors, all over their bodies from this one. Did anybody see More Stately Man? I mean, it was a great.
They were bruised.
It was the Bach naked dance. Anyway, everyone was so happy that they had a week off that they pitched in, the actors pitched in and bought me a very expensive spa treatment in gratitude. But, and then we went on to do, we did a run in New York, and then we did it at Edinburgh Festival, and also at De Single in Antwerp. So anyway, it changed my life for the better. It's a great experience.
Bill, how did you meet Ivo?
Met him, I think, in this room after Hedda Gabler. I think that was the first time I met him. I had been introduced to his work with Hedda Gabler, Streetcar. I did not see More Stately Mansions, sorry. But then Misanthrope I just got a call saying would I like to do Alsace.
Yeah, because I called Jack Doolan. Don't you remember that we were having lunch one day outside my apartment, and I was already casting Misanthrope, and I said, and Jack Doolan had said, well, it's between a couple of actors, we really can't settle on somebody for Alceste, and we were sitting there, and I said to you, you should be playing Alceste, why don't you call Jack and see what's up? And either you called him or somebody else called Jack, and they went, of course, it should be Bill. And so I got you that.
So how'd you get there first, Tom?
An audition. I mean, it was a straight up, you have an audition. But I had seen Streetcar, and which I hadn't liked, Streetcar. I just had a very, like just one of those reactions people have with Ivo's work. I didn't understand it. I thought it was too obvious in all sorts of ways. And then I saw Hedda. And Hedda I had done twice before. I'd been in various productions of that play, and I knew it really well. And Hedda, I thought was not only definitive, it was just the play. And in the most pure, straight way I'd ever imagined seeing it. So I was really thrilled. And I felt, I have to meet this man, no matter how the audition is. And it was Molière, and I was, so, you know, that we had the, I don't know whose translation for the audition, Wilbur probably. So there were rhyming couplets, you know, and I'm working on how to use the language and stuff. And I came into this room, and I did it once, and the scene was, what's the character Quincy played? The name of that character. And my character, there's a very simple, beautiful scene in The Misanthrope where my character just basically says, you know, I've always loved you. If it doesn't, she's in love with him. If that doesn't work out, please consider me. And it's in sort of funny language and rhyme couplet. And I did it, and he said, okay, well, what if you just sit down on the bench and tell it to her? Really quick, just simply tell it to her, say it to her. Don't worry about whether the rhyme, you know, just say that that's what you think to her. Don't worry about feeling anything. And it was a really, honest audition, not from me, but from him. And I thought I left the room, feeling I had to be in the production. Mm. And I was doing something with Elizabeth at the time, a Will Eno play, somewhere.
Naked Angels.
Naked Angels. And I went back and I said, you know, because Elizabeth was, had the inside track, so I said, call and find out.
So she got you that.
She got me that.
It's all reciprocity, isn't it? I had the same reaction. I had your Streetcar reaction when I saw Hedda the first time. And I was like, I hate this, that's not theater. And I went really crazy. And then I saw it, like, a buddy of mine who took me there was like, you've been talking about that play for 3 weeks. And I was like, I know. And I went and saw it like twice more. And I was like, no, I actually love this, Why do you think the audiences do that? Because when we were doing Little Foxes, people would leave all the time. And when I saw Roman Tragedies, people were getting very angry. And, why do you think that is? Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. I mean, I saw the play. I saw it twice, but
I saw you there, yeah. Why do you think that is with his plays? What is it about them? Because actually, like, your description of working with on The Misanthrope is so true. It's just so honest, the way he works. Why do you think that people get so crazy?
The work is very aggressive. And I don't know, I don't really know, because he really seems very true to the plays to me, and I read people talking about how he does things to the plays or imposes something onto the plays, and you'd really have to give me evidence of that, because I think he's a really text-based director.
He said at one point, or more than one point, that what he does is he reads the play over and over and over and over again, and he gets a feeling for a scene, but it's complete. He calls himself a very simple, naturalistic, I think he even used that word, director. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that endeared me to him forever is the way he talks to actors. Well, he has many ways of talking to actors, including, come on, from in the back if he needs you to be a little bit more intense. But he was so intimate and so tender, and would get up every 2 seconds and come and, put his hand on you and talk, and it's very beautiful.
Not what I expected.
And I found him to be, at the time, the smartest director I'd ever worked with. I thought I would know, I thought I was sussing out what a scene was, or a moment was. He'd been around long enough, you figure you know something. And he would always and be, you know, many times more brilliant in like his interpretation or what he wanted or what he was asking for. Brilliant in that, like, stripped bare, right on. I don't know about people. People didn't walk out. I mean, I guess people always walk out of stuff that's strong, but in More Stately Mansions, I don't remember anyone walking out as cruel as those people were to each other. There was something about, it was such a difficult physical feat to do it, that the actors had to be so in love with each other to make it happen, you know, in love in the highest sense, really trusting that. I got from audience members, wow, I can't believe I loved you all so much and you were so horrible. So, I don't know.
Can you talk a bit about, any of you, the first kind of stumbling block in the rehearsal room with him, if you had one, where you thought, like, I literally don't know what's going on? Or did you ever feel that way, working with him, or was it always very easy?
I don't know if it was ever very easy, because it's so rigorous, what he demands. I think the first stumbling block, or a stumbling block for me, was sort of attuned to what Tom was saying about being simple. I felt a need to actually make something that didn't need to actually be there in terms of my body, my behavior, my, you know, that I needed to do stuff in a particular place. It was actually the beginning. It was the beginning of the show, which was Tom and I. And early on, I can remember, it was right over there. And in that corner, and there was a little platform, and Celeste comes out, and I don't think I had the newspaper at the beginning. I felt, which is how it started, with Celeste leaving this party, sitting down. Alceste, and going to a newspaper. But at the beginning, he didn't, there was not that prop. And so what I was doing was a lot. I was trying to make something that, you know, didn't belong. And I can remember that being something that went on for a little while, and I was struggling with it. And I don't know when he gave me the newspaper, but that was his way of, you know, deflecting my need to have to make something, to try to behave, or start the thing off in a way that didn't really need to be. And it perfectly defined where Alceste needed to be at that moment, without losing track of what was happening at the moment that Tom and I were walking in. But then there were subsequently other stumbling blocks as well.
More than any director I've ever worked with, I find something, I mean, the only plays I've ever rehearsed in this room were the two with him, and there are so many memories in this room of, more than any other director, of something that's bullshit looms so large, it's like, something that isn't the truth is so false to him. And he might not know what's the right way to play something, but he knows when something is not true. And that long scene, that scene was like 15 pages. It was just the two of us at the top of the play. And I had a long, long passage of dialogue to him that was very convoluted, and we tried it all sorts of ways, and I tried to be honest and direct and sit there and just say it, and it was too boring. And I knew something active needed to happen. And one day he said, all right, you just need, it was not an angry speech. If you did an analysis of the thing, wasn't really motivated by my anger toward him. But he said, I just want you to go off on me. You are tired of him having all this attention, him being so self-involved. Shake him out of it. And so I just, as an exercise, I thought, screamed and harangued and ripped my vocal cords and just moved to the big platform here, and I banged it up and down on the thing. And I got through the whole thing, and I thought, well, that was wrong. And he went, Tom, I'm so sorry, but that's the way you're going to have to do it. So hence the vocal problems in every one of his plays.
I was thinking about stumbling blocks, and yeah, I would say the biggest stumbling blocks have always been when he asks an actor, me or anyone, to go beyond what they think they're capable of. Yeah. Often it manifests, well, it's either physical or vocal. Emotional never seemed to be an issue because I guess we're just game, but the vocal thing, and that's particularly the screaming. I remember in More Stately Mansions, which was my first with him, having scenes with Jenny Bacon and him. I was the mother and she was the daughter-in-law, and having us like really going after each other, screaming and overlapping at the same time. It was just hard. It wasn't that we didn't do it, but it was really hard. And he doesn't believe in choreographing fights.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
It's like very real on the stage, and whatever happens sort of happens.
Actually, I think there's still a hole in this
still?
wall. Tom put my head through that wall during the rehearsal.
I have bone chips in my elbow from the fight
with Alfredo.
Yeah.
And I can't straighten that finger.
Right, that's right.
Even though I worked on it backstage for weeks.
Right. Glad you gave up your healing.
It worked. He's just.
Were you a fight choreographer on that show, Joan?
Huh?
Did you fight choreograph that show?
No. I
There's
was.
no
Oh,
fight.
you
I did energy work on
finger.
his pinky backstage. I guess that's the last time I'll do that.
There was a thing I know was actually there are things, of course, in almost every show, that points that one has to reach that are great challenges each night, and not just for working with Ivo. That's, you know, in every experience I've had, there are always points that I'm thinking before the show, God, I think, you know, somehow we have to muster to get there. He has this expression, I don't know if you guys got it, I know he calls it flatline. And it's often misinterpreted, and I misinterpreted it in the beginning as well, where it's not 0 and it's not 100. It exists sort of beyond either one of those two places. And somehow getting there emotionally and then also sustaining that, but without the kind of pyrotechnics that are easily accessible, I think, for us as actors to go to. For me, especially, you know, that's always my #1 door, is, oh, well, flatline, or I'm getting to this really heightened place emotionally to get very big or loud or emotionally crazy or whatever, what have you, and attract attention that way. He is asking for something else, and I'm not sure I ever achieved it, but it always helped being at a place physically of almost exhaustion, where the thought had to move like normally, and yet vocally it had to be sustained in a place that was electric, that was that filled the room and didn't become small or quiet or anything. Not that it couldn't be quiet, but it still had to be sustained. And so that was, I remember a couple of points in that production that he was asking me and someone else, whoever the partner was at the time in the scene, to reach those points and communicate that way with each other. And I'm not sure, I think maybe we did it a couple of times, maybe. but it was a great goal that he'd set up for us as an actor. It was an amazing thing to strive for. And I remember, I'll never forget that expression, and I still use it for myself and can apply it, I think, to other characters I'm playing at certain moments, perhaps. But it's a great tool now I have that I learned from him, a flatline, and it's something that I can use for myself. That as sort of physiologically know sort of kind of what door maybe I need to go through to get to that place. And it's a great thing to have. It's a great thing to be asked to try and create. Because I think when it happens, like much of the things that happen in his productions, that it affects the room in such a way. People have never really seen it because I'm not sure that it's been asked by actors in that way, other than filling a room in the way that we all know how to fill rooms. I don't know if that's particular.
Yeah, no, I think he asked.
What was
more
your
than-
experience?
I think he asked me more than anyone's ever asked me to do. I mean, it's funny because Beth said something to me that she was like, I'm just warning you, you've been on the moon, and you're gonna come back down, and everything from once you've been on the moon is not gonna seem the same anymore. And I wonder if you guys have had that experience too, that going from working with Ivo to working on something else, and you realize that no one's asking me to do anything. No one's asking anything of me. Like, we're not even working. We're like having coffee. That's what it feels like. And I wonder if you can talk about that.
There's something about, I'm not sure if I get the same experience when I work with Robert.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing, and that started with me, not the first time I worked with him, because that was a huge thing. It was Richard II, and although, but Ollie's Prison, this Edward Bond play that he and I did, a bunch of other folks. There's something about the ideas that I think that Ivo, especially, the ideas of a particular scene, or even when it is broken down even more, in an exchange, in a dialogue, in a sentence, in a movement or what. There's something about the idea that's being conveyed that is a great handle to have, I think, I know, as an actor. And so that is also, besides the stuff we do as actors in the space and the dynamic between us, but the idea that's trying to be conveyed, which I think he crystallizes and gets to a very pure place. And everybody's on the same page, hopefully. It can't help but sort of be magnified. And then, and that, I think, is sometimes what's missing. It gets general sometimes. I know I've experienced it working with other folks. It becomes sort of vague, it becomes kind of general. And everyone's not on the same page. And I think because the efficiency of the work as well in the room, in terms of time.
In relationship to that, I've had a similar experience with Robert as well, which is, for me, it's funny because those two men, for me, are in the room, in the moment, are the kindest, most gentle directors, for the most part. But there's something about asking, it's the idea and then the integrity and the insistence to not cut corners, the insistence to go all the way. And in Ivo's case, I always felt that he asked me and the other actors to do the impossible. Or I guess, as I said before, that which you would imagine in your mind, I couldn't possibly do that and survive. But then you do it, he demands that you do it, and Robert too in a different way. So there's also that integrity and that, I don't know, I can say that with Ivo, I've had 2 performances. They were both in more stately mansions, but I've felt it similar in other things, where just for me personally, not from the outer or anybody else in the audience, I did everything that I would ever hope I could have done as a performer in this lifetime, and I could leave the business, just feeling great that I had done it. Twice it happened, once, as actually, well, anyway, once here at the workshop and once in Edinburgh. And that's an amazing feeling, to be so high from the work and from the connection with each other. I don't know, it's impossible to put into language, I probably sound like an idiot, but something about that rigor and integrity and selflessness or something connected, no ego, you know, connected to making a piece of work that everybody gives everything to. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Do you think that, in addition to that, the design element of any piece, of a piece like Ivo's or something by Woodruff or Foreman, this kind of, like when we were in the big purple box in Little Foxes, that you guys just saw that big purple box, like I would have had trouble, I imagine I would have had trouble doing that play in a room with a sofa. I mean, the way Ivo wanted to do it, that there's something about this surrealistic landscape we were put in that affects you. And
well, certainly, and it's very clear that, you know, in the instance of the Little Foxes, that's a play we're very used to people, actors flouncing around in period and southern accents and using objects and enjoying the milieu of the time and the beautiful home, and there's business that you do with a cigarette and a thing, or, you know, and this is what we're used to seeing from the Little Foxes. And part of, probably nobody here who saw that would know about the lamb.
No.
Yeah. I should tell this because it's about
You
decor, I guess, yeah. Not only was there no furniture in the room, a decision had been made even before we started rehearsals that what was going to happen in the Little Foxes, that as the play was happening in the room, on the projection, you would see through the course of the whole evening, they went upstate to some humane slaughter situation or whatever. And they filmed a lamb being sheared, being slaughtered, being, I guess as far as the meat being carved off, and so forth. And this video was intended to play things slowly through the piece. And I believe we did it for the first preview audience, maybe the second, but no more than that. And as actors, we had no sense of it. We couldn't even really see it. But I can't imagine what it was for the audience. And I wish Jim Nicola were here because I had intended to ask him about exactly what happened.
What the conversation
because
was.
I know there was a lot of back and forth between Joan and Ivo and Jim, and ultimately, you know, nobody forces Ivo to cut a scenic element like that. But there was a sense, I think, Ivo had that what was happening on the stage was strong enough, and that video image was redundant, or an obvious italicizing of something that's clear in the play and does not require that. I just wanted to say that because he seems so rigorous and so, those scenic elements with him seemed so predetermined, but he also was alive enough to understand that in a thing they had at great expense and great, we might not even have had video in the show if not for that original idea. And he cut it. And I think it was a great benefit to production.
That kind of, it seems to me, sort of testifies to how much of a true artist he is. To have really the courage to cut something like that, when it's such a foundation, a basis of something, you know, obviously a visual that is in his mind to be able to, after so much time, get to the point of making something and then realizing just that and saying goodbye to it. And in a way, being able to let that go, which I think is, I know it's a supremely difficult thing to do when you're making something, and especially if you love it and you're in love with it, when to be able to say, no, it's too much or whatever. I think great artists are able to do that, you know.
And back to what you were saying before, Bill, about the idea or like what it was about. Like we did know about the lamb slaughter. Like we rehearsed the entire play with lamb slaughter.
Right.
And that we watched the video, you know. And so I think that it fed us in a really huge. Another scenic element that is really amazing is the chair you were in Alice in Bed. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I can show you. I can show you. My body is still like that from the chair. It was this chair that was meant to be a bed. No, it's true. I still see a chiropractor because my body got completely messed up from it. But it was made of, I don't know what kind of plastic material, but it was off kilter. So it was. What do you want me to say about it?
Just
Other
your
than it was, like,
experience
torturous.
working. Like, how did that affect your experience having to perform the play?
Alice in Bed, I don't know, did anybody get to see that one? It was the scariest one for me because, well, mostly I was all by myself out on stage, but emotionally, it's a story of Alice James, who had a lot of psychosomatic issues. We did the film together.
We did.
Yeah. There was a lot of video footage in it. And I would literally pray before, just hoping I could get through it in one piece and do all of the, the changes from one emotional landscape to another, physical changes. But the chair, actually, what am I going to say? First of all, it was a true collaboration. He didn't know what he wanted to do for the performance of this piece. It's a story, it was written by Susan Sontag, the story of this woman who was brilliant, but unlike her brothers, Henry James and William James, there were some that were schizophrenic, a couple of the brothers. She was kept inside and raised as a, female, and couldn't exercise her great intellect and her autonomy. So she sort of imploded and she kind of went crazy, and she finally ended up with cancer, which made her very happy because she actually had a real illness. So it's a tragic story, but this piece had a lot of fanciful things. Beth was in it too in the video. Mm-hmm. And he was very collaborative in the making of it, but I'm not answering your question. What was the chair like?
Well, how did it affect that performance? I just can't imagine. Like, and I've only seen.
Well, it was very uncomfortable, and I just couldn't ever rest. I was constantly in a state of kind of physical anguish because it was so uncomfortable. And there were moves that I had to do in it. There was one in a nightmare section where it was just moving my head back and forth repeatedly over the course of, 10 minutes, or it felt like an hour. And my neck, I think I gave myself arthritis, but my neck has never been the same. So, and it had, the chair was just off kilter enough so that there was no physical alignment. It helped the performance. It did, it helped, it contributed to, and I had to be carried and put into it. I couldn't get into it, it was too high. And I had this very strange costume, which was a white, like nightgown / sheet. So it looked like the sheet, but it actually was the nightgown, so part of it fit and part of it hung over, and it was actually quite beautiful, but, and there were all the things in her home, in her imagination, and in her room were on strings, and they went up and down as she hallucinated. She took took a lot of drugs, so there was this big hypodermic, and at one point there was a nurse that was, it was cut from the show, another thing, it was cut, but it was a nurse that came to visit her that was a mechanized little robot, and it literally scurried along the floor and had a nurse's cap on. It was cut. So the chair, I mean, the scenic in that was that we toured that through the Netherlands and through Holland and Belgium, and the tech took days to get that right. I'm still not answering your question. Well, I guess it's very simple. It contributed beautifully because it was really uncomfortable. And she was uncomfortable in her own skin.
It's such a huge, it's like all of his stuff is so sacrificial, and I guess anything an actor does is vaguely sacrificial. But that in particular is such a huge, like you've sacrificed your skeleton.
I did.
You know, for Ivo.
Well, for the greater good.
Well, there's a certain, there's like a kind of respect that happens that you want to, you know, not just please, but then over time in the room as you're working on something, you start to realize, wow, this is something extremely special. The privilege of being a part of and working with people, you know, Tom and Joan, Janine, you know, everybody. That also, you can't really mention Ivo without Joan. And there's like such a, like, Joan, his partner and the designer of these shows, somehow makes them, you know, gives them architecture in the space, which is so important, obviously. And I remember relying so much, it was so great for us to have a sense of what it was going to be, and when we were in this room, and needing to know, and Joan would sort of they kind of, I remember him telling us that the floor was going to be soft, it was going to be rubberized, it was going to be, you know, no problem for us to bang around on and lie on and sort of luxuriate at times, and these fights, these like knockdown, drag-out fights, and people like, it was nuts at times, would be fine. And we got into the floor on the stage in tech, and it was like, it's like, but what do we do? Are we going to do this? And he's like, I don't know, it's fine. So it was not safe. We were not given this sort of net to fall on that we all thought maybe we would have. And of course, it had to be that sort of place, because they had been describing to us what that space was, which was a petri dish, essentially, for human beings, this little group of human beings, to be put into a petri dish. And that, what this was an experiment of human behavior. And take from it what you will, but it's Molière, and so it was right on the nose. And so then we, you know, sort of had to give to make that live, and the space itself was really a petri dish. Until we destroyed it, or they destroyed it. They had us then thus move out of that and destroy everything that the people in the room as observers suddenly had this experience with.
It puts actors in a hard position, and I will say this, because I adore Ivo, and we could sit here all night telling you why, but after having had the experience with Misanthrope, I was then going to do The Little Foxes, and I read The Little Foxes, and I'm really bad at violence on stage. I mean, I'm not good. I'm a fight choreographer's worst nightmare. I'm really bad at it. I can't fake it well, and I did get injured in the Misanthrope, and I had very little to do in that. And then I'm reading The Little Foxes, going to do The Little Foxes, and there's a moment where my character, Oscar, it says he slaps Bertie across the face. If he slaps her when I read it, what the hell is he doing? The version of it. And so I came in and I was like, and the first day I was like, I'm really worried about violence. I don't, look. And he said, well, and he really, and very healthily so, I think, hates choreography. I don't much like it either. When you see those brilliant fights that people have worked on, and the fight choreographer is great, and the people are really good at it, and you just sort of go, wow. they're really good at this. But you admire it, but you aren't lost in the violence. It's my experience, usually, with that stuff. And that never happens in Ivo's plays. It's just, you know, if you're angry at somebody, you grab them and you throw them against the wall. If you want to fuck somebody, you try to. It's like hard, you just do it. And that's a thrilling experience for an actor, but I thought, what are we going to do? And he said, well, you're going to slap her. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, but you're going to slap her to the ground, and then she's going to, so strong. You're going to slap her to the ground, she's going to get up and come back. Then you're going to slap her to the ground again, and then she's going to get up and she's going to come back. And then you're going to slap her to the ground, and she's going to get up and she's going to come back 4 or 5 times, I don't remember. And it was a brilliant idea and really beautiful, and I was really scared of it. And I thought, well, what do we technically do about the slap? I didn't know, and so there's brilliant Tina Bankow playing Birdie, and I'm like, okay, Tina, you know, you have to be honest about this. I can't, I mean, and she's like, because Tina, you know, she's like, well, we're just going to show him a stage slap, and we're going to do it really good, so he'll be convinced we can do it. So she's doing all this crap, and I'm like, she's like, oh! And he's like, oh, please. Can't do that. You just slap her. And, okay, Tina, I'm going to just try to find the place and be okay. And I was like that, and she went, it's okay, that's okay. And I went, are you sure? And she said, yeah, that's fine. Because we wanted to please him so much. The idea of not pleasing him was just awful. And so we did the dress, the tech. We did a preview, we did a second preview, and she kept saying it's fine. And then she came in on the 3rd day, and she said, no, I can't move my jaw. No, I will not do this. It's awful that I want to please this man so much that I'm willing to let this happen to me. No. And she went up to him and she said, no. Figure it out. You're the director, it's not my problem. You figure it out. But no, I will not be treated this way as an actor in your play. And we together came up with something fake that sold it. It probably was not as strong as the slaps were. I mean, she was facing upstage, I was facing her, and I hit her in the stomach with my fist. And I pulled the punch, and it read fine. But it was not what it was when you knew I had literally slapped her, and she got back and came for more. And that's a difficult moment, because I adore him, and I really loved it. But that was a moment where this actor, God bless her, had to say, I can't. We have to accept a compromise.
Yeah.
And I admired it. It was hard for her.
My actor got a compromise from you getting dragged across that floor.
You didn't deserve
it. Okay, we're going to open the floor for questions from you guys, and it doesn't mean you have to, because I will continue to blabble on if you don't. But if you do have questions for these guys, please raise your hands. Yeah.
The limited amount of his work that I've seen, you mentioned it somewhat briefly, but all characters and performers are always so together, knit into this same world. And, you know, you see a play sometimes and someone's like kind of off in Jupiter and everyone else is on Mars. Could you talk a little bit about working inter-actorally and how he works with you together, not just with you personally, and how he cultivates that? If there's anything that's there.
I mean, I don't know. Like in More Stately Mansions, I don't mean to keep returning to that one because it was the same with Misanthrope. I mean, well, in More Stately Mansions, we bonded so deeply because we had to do such extreme things together that we needed each other desperately. You know, we needed each other. So we were like, it was life or death together on that stage. It was not every man for himself at all. You couldn't get through the performance without making a deep connection. And we used to hold each other's hands before the show and just like pray in our own sort of crazy way and just say, oh, please let us just get through the show tonight. And, you know, we developed a sort of a, I still feel this way about performance now, which is performing which is if there is any kind of an ideal, you know, to be able to go all the way and immolate oneself on the, you know, the pyre of performance. Just a bit of Artaud and a bit of that the performance becomes the intention to do that. Whether you make it or not, who knows? But at least, you know, that's the. But so for me, and with Misanthrope too, it was so tightly, not choreographed, but tightly woven that I was always finding everyone. I mean, couldn't have gotten through it without you guys. You know, it just demands that we're on the same wavelength. And then, of course, he picks people who are willing to, I don't know, go there together. I'm sure. Pardon?
I wouldn't add anything to that, but it's my experience.
How does he determine getting an actor who's willing to go there in an audition process, I wonder? Because that takes like a leap of faith that he's gonna get somebody who's going to devote, you know.
I didn't audition for him. Jim told him, he said, you have to work with this person.
Yeah. Because like Thomas, like speaking as clearly and simple in your audition, that seems like so one side of it.
It surprised me too. You know, it was not what I anticipated. I thought that if he, with what he would get to see if you could be strong, if you could be emotionally violent or aggressive. You know, those were the cliches I had about him, and that was. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's a good question, but it requires somebody else.
I actually sat in this room through the Hedda Gabler auditions as the reader for the auditions. And so I saw a bunch of auditions with him. And I don't know if this says anything, but a couple of actors who I won't name came in and very openly said, "I'm so sorry, I opened a show last night. I'm extremely hungover. And I just got the script." And they were sort of a mess, but in that way you said, if you're extremely physically exhausted and you don't have the energy to hide, you know, they walked out of the room and he said, "You see, I like that kind of actor."
Hungover.
When I auditioned for him, I pretended like it was the opposite day. I remember like looking at the script and being like, I have to make the opposite choice from the opposite. And so I did that to our scene, but like I knew everything. Like I was the smartest person in the room. And he was like, and then we got in and he was like, "This is the wrong way to do it."
It would seem that only he can answer that question, but that makes a lot of sense, Greg. That he would be, if the person, regardless of what, because we all come in with all sorts of weird presupposition and baggage and ideas and who, you know, all this stuff when we walk into a room to audition, which is the worst process in the universe ever. But if then one's willing, I think it's a willingness to do what he's doing and not keep all of those barriers up. You know, if he sees that, I would imagine that that's something that is attractive to him. That it's, regardless of what's there, that there's a willingness to try and do. Because I've seen people not, you know, not just with the physical stuff, but also the you know, well, that just doesn't make any sense, or whatever. Instead of just trying, instead of going and go through this door and see where this door takes one, you know, without the prejudgment and the you know.
Yeah, I've seen actors have a hard time with him who really want to be sold on an idea before they'll try it. They really want to talk it through, and they really want to understand the logic of why before they'll give the director a shot at it. That I don't think they're very happy in it, because.
Do you think that logic doesn't work all the time with Ivo?
I don't know. I just don't think it.
What do you mean by logic? Because that's a really interesting point. There's something that I truly love. I'm so happy you mentioned that. There's a kind of rationality that goes on sometimes on stage. I observe. This is purely my opinion. There's a certain rationality that happens where people are, or we as actors, try and plot something like that horrible word arc, you know, and that there's this thing that somehow has to make logical sense, that we do this and we do that, and then it all has a rationality to it. And I remember Ivo saying that, I think I was making the argument about, well, you know, then because I'm here at 6, I would go to 7. And it's like, why? Do you not in your own life sometimes go from 2 to 11? And that we are not rational beings often. And that often the best plays are written by the irrational, about the irrational behavior of us. And then come around to show that. And there's a certain irrationality to what I think he's trying to achieve. Or at least as an actor, I took that as license to be irrational sometimes, to go there, because certainly the people in, you know, misanthrope do not always behave rationally. And yet we, I think, sometimes try and put on this kind of thing. I don't know if it's because of our training or if it's because of what. Somebody is saying that we have to be this way. And I think there's a great sense of freedom and space that happens with him, that it is okay to, you know, to be irrational. And that maybe logic does get in the way. Maybe we as human beings, just as, you know,
or that our
smart
ideas
actors
about
want to
realism or rationality or logic just dampen a broader possibility.
Yeah. Or not. I mean, it's. I think what happens is then it's. I think then it's a willingness to do either one. Which
Yeah,
one works.
at least. Sorry. Go ahead.
No.
At least have the willingness or the freedom to take the hat off, keep the cap off, and, you know, step outside of the box.
Noticed that something
I saw that performance.
Yeah, and I just, the actress playing Cleopatra just stopped and started yelling, "Music!"
Yeah.
And the actor who had previously played Coriolanus sort of came on and started just telling everyone what to do. And I thought and it was like this beautiful like revelry and like being in it together. And when prior to that I was sort of just in this like stark asylum sort of portion, but it made me, I guess I thought about that when you were talking about this area of flatlining, where it's like both 0 and 100, and sort of like how easily they were able to move between doing the play and not doing the play, and it's convoluted, but hopefully you talk more about that. Flatlining.
No, I think that's just as, you know, good an example of that as any. Our situation that he was asking us, I remember when he used that term in a very particular place in the show was similar in a way, although it had been created by us. I suppose it would be as if, but instead of the going from, or it happened in reverse, you know, where it was a lot of stuff that was going on where it seemingly something had gone wrong, because there was an element that happened in the show where the fourth wall was broken like entirely, and everything was just sort of like negated in terms of our premise about how we watch theater in that theater downstairs. And everything went out on the street, and then it came out, and cameras went. They followed the scene out in the street, and then it was a horrible fight, and then garbage showed up, or I grabbed all the garbage bags off of 4th Street and brought them into the theater and dragged them in, and people were somewhat startled. It's like, no, this can't be real, because suddenly the outside world invaded this world. So reality suddenly happened, if we did it effectively, of course. And like when the sound didn't happen. And then we went to a moment of the sort of world that, I guess, preceded what you were experiencing up to that point. We then had to achieve maintain the intensity of what had just happened, but then very intimate and maintain what was going on in the room, and also feel what was going on, what the audience had just gone through as well. So it became so inclusive in that way. And he was asking for us to take it further, but not in a biggish kind of displaying way. So it sort of happened in reverse, but I think it's the same thing. I think all of us, in a way, should be prepared to have to stop at any moment. Either to just stop and start again, or just have the allowance, have the freedom, you know, to be able to just do that. I remember, what was the name of the assistant, the dramaturg, brilliant dramaturg that we had? What was his name?
Bart?
Bart was Ivo's dramaturg for, I think, all three.
Still.
Oh, still? I thought they'd stopped. But one night, Ivo was not at performance because it was like he was here and then he was gone. He left after opening, or did he miss opening?
He didn't make.
He didn't make opening. He left. He saw previews and then had to go and do something somewhere across the world. But Bart was there, and there was a moment in the very first scene, opening night. Tom and I, as he said, had this very long scene, and one of my monologues, I completely dried. In the midst of this, you know, rhyming couplet, you know, 25 on stage. And then I remembered what seemed to be an eternity, and I started talking again. And Bart came up to me afterwards and thought that that had been a planned moment. But I learned that that was the sort of, you know, I could play in that field. It was okay to do that. I had that license to be able to do it, and it made me then think about, you know, stuff, you know, to do in the future. I don't think
Christine? Well, I also got to see Roman Tragedies, and I did see Little Foxes, and I would love to hear about working with a director that's been working with the company for so long, that knows his language, and then kind of inheriting the language in such a small rehearsal process, and then almost being probably cut off when you're in a run, and when you finally figure out what they were talking about, just aging into the play, or
I'd be very interested to hear him ask the question of that comparison, because I don't think I've ever heard him talk about that. It's, I'm sure, very different. Oddly, you know, both of the plays I did with him, the first one was the beginning of rehearsals, I don't know if you remember, was postponed by a week, and we didn't postpone the opening, so we lost almost a full week. The Little Foxes, we started, and 2 weeks in, he had a commitment and left for 6 days. And we spent the 6 days in the middle of the 4 weeks running lines. Just coming in every day for 6 hours in this room, just the actors. After 2 weeks of rehearsal, we just ran the lines, and of course we ended up doing a hell of a lot more than just learning the lines, because we got to know each other, we got to know the scenes, we had breakthroughs in the scenes because we weren't in any, but I was always amazed at that confidence of him to go, and I don't know, I really like, I don't know if this is personal, I guess, but I don't want to be in a company, it's just my thing. I like to be kind of promiscuous in that sense, artistically. I just don't, I'm very interested in what it is like to work with Ivo and then work with somebody who I think is just as brilliant, but 180 degrees away in sensibility. That to me is what is the gift of being the life I've chosen, is that the experiences are spectacular or they're terrible, but they shine very brightly and then they disappear. And so I don't know what the experience would be to be in full-time employment by him doing play after play, or a repertory of plays that you travel with. I can't imagine, I don't think it would be for me. Because I go to somebody like you mentioned, Hal Hartley, or I don't know, Sarah Rule, or somebody who's just like an artist of the theater who's just completely different. And I look at Ivo, who's all about direct emotionality, and then you work with somebody like Hal, who is embarrassed by overt displays of emotion. He wants everything very, very capped. And it doesn't, that's not an invalid artistic idea. But you can't, as soon as you decide, well, Hal's right, and this is just, you know, masturbatory emotion, or you decide, well, I'm not really expressing anything with you because real expression is what Ivo does, then you're screwed either way. I really enjoyed the leaving Ivo's world and taking what I've learned and picked up in it and making up, you know, finding that in other worlds there are applications or ways I've stretched in this one. And I wonder if I was a company member, although the work I've seen from that company is so magnificent. But that would be my other argument, you know, my antithetical argument as an actor. That's how
I talked to a lot of the actors after Roman Tragedies on the first night and then the second night as well, and because there were some that I knew and some that I didn't know, and you know, to a person they were thrilled to be a part of it. First of all, they were thrilled to be in New York. They loved coming to New York. But they were thrilled to be a part of the piece, and a lot of them said, you know, it had to do with being committed to what the pieces were saying about the world we live in. They were, you know, Shakespeare, so the language was extraordinary, and they were thrilled to be a part of it. I mean, they do these things in rep, and I don't know if this is answering your question or not, but they do these things in rep, so sometimes there's a gap. You know, you might not do it for 6 months and then you go back to it. So it's a kind of there's always something, it's always shaken up. You know, and not everybody's in every show, but I remember when we did More Stately Mansions at the workshop here, then the next year we did it in Edinburgh. So we had a whole year off, and then we came back to it and rehearsed it in Europe, and it was so much fun because it had gotten so much deeper. And Ivo said he just really loves to do that. He loves to let a show go and then go back, return to it, and see what shows up. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the way he can get the idea being communicated into the room beyond the sort of behavioral storytelling in the scene. Can anyone talk a little bit about sort of how, does he just tell you what is going on, or does it sort of emerge? What's that about?
I remember him being kind of clear what the goal of the scene was, but it also pertains to the idea of the whole piece as well, and then moving down and how within the scene, what's happening within the scene between the people in the scene applies to the larger idea of what was happening. We, you know, had this petri dish idea that he was very, you know, and I remember him giving he read from 2 pages of something he had written, right? That was really articulate about essentially living in the world today with technology and how we communicate to each other and how we don't communicate to each other. And the fluidity, right? It was the liquidity of the world now for us. And he wanted to really use that in an idea, and we did with, you know, certain aspects of the production technically. But within the scene, I think he was pretty clear with scenes as to what was trying to be accomplished. Because again, we didn't have that much time. We didn't have a lot of time. And what I found in that experience with him was that there's just an efficiency of the work. Time, there is no minute that is wasted. And I think part of that has to do with your question about the language. There's an interesting thing that happens because he struggles to try and communicate ideas because his language, his vernacular is different. He has a different, you know, set of, you know, words than we do in the way we communicate. And he can express himself better in Dutch and often will turn and start talking in Dutch to Jan or Bart, and maybe someone who has a better, understanding of English can then communicate to him, and then he can try and communicate it. And so, in a way, everyone is sort of really paying it, like the antennae are really, really high, because we want to understand what it is, and we only have 6 hours to work, which is no time. It's just no time to really, really work, and that's what he's asking. And so I remember us getting to what scenes were about very quickly. That he was, maybe it was because I was struggling to understand how to do, what it was that Alsace was trying to achieve, get from somebody, or where, what was happening. But it was very, he was, as articulate as he could be to get to the point, to get to that, core. And then once the core is stated, then get there, do it. What is Bill going to bring to it? How do you do this? I remember him giving me a task of walking into the space, and how do you walk into a room of 11 people, or I don't know how many people, it was 8 people, having a party? How do you shut them up? And giving me, what that's like, okay, there you go. How do you shut up? You can't just walk in and scream and get everybody. You have to get everybody's attention somehow. It's a difficult task.
You found a way.
Well,
you found a way.
With a lot of help from him and Joan, which was and Tal, the video guy. But because my efforts were failing, I was like, well, I can do this, I can do that, and then he was like, it's like, good try, Bill, good try. It's like, he was always like 2 steps ahead of me, knowing what I was going to do, and then suggested one thing, and so it was like, it was just like, go through this door and see what you can do.
I wanted to respond to that too. He demands that you memorize, that you come in memorized. So right away, a lot of, flaccid time is cut away. And I remember, at least he said in More Stately Mansions, but I think it was true for the Misanthrope and certainly for Alice in Bed. He said, I hate to rehearse. So we would have rehearsals that would be 2-3 hours long, period, end. For Alice in Bed, we rehearsed, because it was just him and me, and then later at the end of the play, another actor comes on stage. An hour, 2 hours, take a break for a few hours, come back. But the thing is, he works with Jan and Tal, but mostly Jan, thinking through everything to such depth with the design and the music and the story and everything, so that when he comes in the room, it's like he almost transmits. I mean, he's so prepared. He's so there that the room is already there. You walk into it and you're like, oh, wow, I'm down there. It's just no bullshit. I mean, so focused. And yeah, and then he'll say, do that, or whatever, he'll propose. And then, but also the thing that's very refreshing for me about him is, if he does, he just says, no, that was terrible. Don't do that, that's terrible.
And you have to get over that very quickly as an actor, which is, I don't want to hear a director say to me that I respect, like, hugely, that was awful, that was really terrible. Laugh at me, a pathetic effort to try and, especially be, sad or heartbroken or whatever. Just kind of then I reach for the thespian. But you have to get over that really quick. It's like, it's not about me and my feelings and my thing. It's about telling the story the way that this guy's asking, for it to be told, within this architecture of design and physical composition and alacrity of thought and all of this stuff. It's like, it's demanding, and so you don't have time to be able to sort of like lick your wounds, like, or I know I can convince him that this is the way, or.
But he's as hard on himself, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I remember two things. One is the first couple days of Little Foxes, we were working on the beginning of that play. And the beginning of that play, it's a big, sturdy, old Broadway Lillian Hellman play. And all the characters are introduced in the first scene, and we are in this room trying to figure it out. And he was so embarrassed because it was not our acting. We were not ready to do anything yet either, but he was just trying to stage the scene. And one thing after the next was just false and stagey and wrong, and he just kept walking around going, oh, first days are so awful. Oh, first days are so embarrassing. This is so terrible. It's not you. It's not you. It's not me. Another thing I remember is MacIntosh. He was not ready to stage the end of the play until I think a day before the preview.
That's right.
We didn't ever. We would. We never did run-throughs first off, and we just worked slowly through the play. And then the week of the preview, we're like, we haven't done the last 3-4 pages. We haven't done them at all. We never read them. We never did. And he said, no, it's not time. It's not time. You can't do it yet. You can't do it yet. It's not time.
He was right.
He was right. And when he finally came to it, we staged it in an hour, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good. He had a good idea.
Yeah, I still think about that.
I do too.
I know.
How that production ended, I really don't
Yeah. I was just talking about it the other day.
That he wasn't going to fake it until he made it. He was just not the people we're going to not work on.
Tom Nollis? I was wondering what he's about with the video. I've seen a number of the shows, no video, and then I remember seeing Misanthrope, and the video was really an important part. And a day later, I went to see somebody else doing Moliere with video, actually. And it was just horrible. It was just an idea, kind of. And I thought, what do you think he's interested in that, has that other level of performance in there?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. It's not a static thing. It's constant. It's always shifting.
I think I understood it more in the Little Foxes than I understood it in Misanthrope. And I don't know what I can't be clear about. That the Misanthrope often seemed about close-ups, and it was all live video. I think there wasn't any online video, was there? Yours, toward the end of the play, you and Jason, there was some stuff you had filmed earlier.
No, at the very end, but the scene we had with the computer.
That was live.
Thingy, that was totally live, but I think the computer stuff was programmed, so it wasn't random. But it seemed random, but it wasn't. But we were live.
There were also technical issues with that video in that show. Do you remember these? There was a delay.
Yeah.
So
Did we see the cameraman too? Am I wrong? Did we see the cameraman? Or
yes.
Yeah, we could on the side.
There were two of them on other sides and back and backstage and stuff. I think with that, I'm only guessing at this, that part of that had to do with the experiment of it. That there were these human beings, almost like germs, that were put into this box, glass box, which was the dish, and made to interact with these given circumstances that they had, and their own individual qualities, and how did they react with each other. And I think part of what was being told to the audience was a sort of microscope that was being used by the cameras to observe, individuals or together or at different angles other than just front.
And that was
and all of it, and then somehow it exploded and came out.
And was Little Foxes that whole? I didn't see Little Foxes. Was that whole?
It had much less video, first off, and it also used because the set of Little Foxes was this box with a section in the middle that was like a big square section right in the middle, so you couldn't see behind that. And there were a couple scenes that took place out of your view that the cameras covered from back there. So you only saw them on the screen as projection, being played live behind the scenery. but generally much less video, yes?
Yeah, much less.
Yes, yes.
But we'd also do like still, we do still life kind of pictures. Tom and I would sit by this coffee machine during another scene for a very long period of time, like almost perfectly still.
Yeah.
But it was, did you find it informative for your performance around the other side of the box?
The video was invisible to me.
No, but your experience of like that. You know, when we would have to like sit there for 7 minutes.
Yeah,
And then
I
go
found
back
it,
into
I
the
found
play.
a use for it as a performer.
Yeah. Can you talk about that?
No.
Okay.
Because I can't articulate it, I don't think. The need to sit there that still and listen. And when you're being photographed listening, it's hard because you can very easily start to get into a pattern of what you look like listening, how are you being filmed, because you don't have lines, and the people are, you know, mostly watching the scene that's taking place, because you're very still on the screen just listening. But you set a challenge for yourself to actively listen to the scene so that because a close-up is very embarrassing if you're not, you know, if you're not actively listening. And it's unforgiving, I should say. And so yes, I used it, it kept me alive during that section, which in any other production of that play, I think I'd be in the dressing room during that scene, gossiping with somebody, and having a cigarette in the alley. So.
We have time for one more question.
Just quickly, in Alice in Bed, because I was the only character on stage, the screens were around her. I don't know where this idea came from in rehearsal. There were nightmare sequences out. There were like 8 projectors projecting stuff. So there was a nightmare sequence. But then there were these scenes, the scenes that in the play were between Alice and her brother, Alice and her father, Alice and the nurse. There's a tea party. They were all filmed, not video, but filmed. And then I, on stage, talked to the characters in the video. It was weird, and I don't know if it worked. I couldn't see it, but we had a hard time in tech. Anyway, that's another story. But so that's a whole other way of experimenting with video.
There was also a thing I remember in Misanthrope where there was something about the vanity, which was connected to what he had said in the first day when he read to us about. He had this great point about our cell phones, really as stabilizers, that we use our phones and we use videos and stuff to somehow stabilize us, give us a place in the world, and that we rush to them in order to then, because when we don't have them, when we're around, it's sort of like, where am I? Or it's like, we don't have a place in the world, and somehow these phones and these videos and these images of us and television and stuff have somehow given us a sort of a center, so every time we get to one or reach for one and we click in, we're suddenly centered, and it's like, oh, okay, good, now I have a place. Now I exist, essentially. Now I exist, because we have a hard time existing without them. And there was something that was happening, I think, with those cameras, too, that fed that idea as well, because we could check ourselves out. And they were used, actually, a couple of times as tools of our vanity or whatever. It was like the camera could manipulate the camera in order to then project this very sometimes beautiful, sometimes ugly image of one and check it out. Was it, who put her makeup on?
Was it Amelia?
Amelia had to do this makeup scene that was just, it was like, oh, it was heartbreaking. In order to like, and she was using the camera and working off this video. And then we could do the same with ourselves and grew to sort of have fun with it and then freak out also about it.
That was weird in that one because you'd be acting the scene and you could see the close-up of yourself behind Bill's head on the screen because you're being filmed this way and they've chosen to cut, and they were cutting live. Yeah. So they'd be like, the shot would be on Bill and it would be, I'd be talking and I'd be like, could we cut to me? I'm talking. It became but it was very, it was an exercise in concentration.
Time for one more question.
So I have seen actually, all these productions except for More Stately Mansions. And they all seem to me to be built so specifically for the actors who were in them, for the space, et cetera, et cetera. So I was shocked when Jim showed me some videos, for example, of Hedda that had been done before the Hedda here, and of More Stately Mansions before the one here, and of Streetcar.
And also Streetcar, yeah.
And so I'm wondering, and I can't remember if that's true of Misanthrope too.
No, he originated it here, but then he showed me video of the one he later did in Europe.
Right.
So it went the other way.
Right, that's right. So I'm wondering what it's like to be in a production that seems, at least from the outside, as though it couldn't have been built with anyone else anywhere. It could, you know, it couldn't be another production that's anything like it. And yet there is, and to be the second one, or to be the first one and haven't seen the second one, what does that do to the process? What does that do? Because from the outside, it doesn't look like he, I don't know how to articulate this. But
like he's recreating it.
It doesn't at all look like he's recreating the production.
I don't think he actually does. He recreates and he doesn't. I know with More Stately Mansions, he, and also with Streetcar, but with More Stately Mansions, actually they showed us pieces of the video. But what we did was really different. And he was embracing, okay, I have different people, these are Americans, it's a whole different thing. I'm gonna, like, and he liked the changes that occurred. I never had even though, because I was replacing Barbara Sakova, and so I was already 3 weeks late. And so my first rehearsal was in the space. I laughed through the whole thing because it was really ridiculous. He was saying, okay, now you go over here and you start screaming. Okay, now we go over there and I start screaming. I had the script in my hand. And now you go over here and you jump up and down, and I mean like that. And now you go sit down really quickly on this bench, and I sat down really quickly, but the bench wasn't there. So I landed on but I mean, but it was just the way it was. I didn't feel, anyway, it felt very fresh, sorry. It felt very fresh. It didn't feel like we were doing another production. And I think he likes to redo stuff, even with his own company. And it's new, so. I don't know, I never had the feeling that we were, you know, understudying the original production in any way. It was never like that. So it felt great. It was, in a way, he was just that much more deeply into the piece because he had actually worked on it even a little bit more. So
he told me about the Misanthrope. He showed me photographs of the one he later did, and he showed me moments, and he said, oh, I solved this. Later, that we never solved it in New York, but later I was, it wasn't even an actor thing, it was something physical that he was describing about, something dramaturgical that he had figured out later. I think Misanthrope was particularly hard for him, as it was so much language to get through, you know, there was so much text, and he was interested in what the people were doing more than he was interested in the delicacies of turns of phrase, and so I think he would always say, oh God, I wish you could just get to it. And yet the point was that you weren't, you know, for whatever reason. But I think he worked through, having done the American production, I think he figured some more things out there. But I've never done it.
Same, it's the same. I think he'd like solve things that, he hadn't solved.
Sure.
So it's a continuum.
Guys, we are past the original allotted time, but thank you so much. And thank you guys for coming. And before you leave, another tradition of process and performance that we go over to Stillwater across the street and continue this conversation, meet all these people here and talk to each other and know one another. And come back in April, on April 8th, Pig Iron will be here from Philadelphia. So thanks again, guys.